In the January Developer Roundtable with Chris Joppa Perkins and Kyle E.G. Olson, there was a lot of technical talk about network stacks, vinyl, ping speeds, and client-side processes. As much as I love hearing about all this technical stuff, it's honestly pretty far out of my wheelhouse. It's super interesting to listen to them passionately describe their work, but I wouldn't even know where to start to explain it all. It really is fascinating, and I suggest listening to the podcast if you hadn't had a chance yet. I'll link it down below. But what really caught my attention was the discussion about the smart leashing that the mobs in Terminus will have. The more Joppa described how enemies will react to players trying to run or climb to safety, the more I realized that trying to run won't be as easy as we've become accustomed to in other games. So, let's dig in. The question being posed was, can you give a few examples of the kind of smart leashing behavior we can expect to see in post-Zoneline Terminus? Last October, during the HD Rendering Pipeline Part 1 developer livestream, it was announced that the work they've been doing now enables Terminus to shed itself of overland zone lines and feel seamless. That then raises the question of how will mobs react once they reach what was once a zone line? The answer is smart leashing. Now, when I hear leashing, the first thing that comes to mind is a predictable pattern of behavior that mobs will all do equally and for the same duration. But as I've come to expect, Joppa and the VR team have a completely new and exciting vision for how mobs will behave. To begin with, when you decide as a player to try to outrun an enemy, there's not a predictable amount of time or distance you need to go to lose that enemy's aggro. Even mobs that are the same type and pulled from the same spot can have varying degrees of how long they'll give chase. Each mob in that group you've pulled can have unique traits and dispositions that control how they act and behave, and how long they'll give chase. Joppa gives the example that a bandit will have a different leashing distance than a wolf, and a wolf will vary from a rabid wolf, and those will be different from a creature like a wyvern. There's also a disposition called alarmist that causes an NPC to run off and search for help from allies. That's more than just mobs aggroing as you both run by, and that could get messy fast. Joppa also mentions that certain dispositions could cause a mob to tire and run more slowly the longer it chases, but there's also the inverse, where a mob can get angrier and faster the longer it has to chase you. It makes me think of an enrage timer that makes the enemy tougher the longer it has to give chase. Now, if all this isn't enough to make each case unpredictable, next they discuss the part that I find really fascinating and a bit terrifying. It's not only the abilities the mobs have, but mix it in with the AI element VR has given the creatures of Terminus, and we are in for some very challenging content. We saw in the June 4th, 2021 developer livestream, VR featured their AI system. In it, they showcased how mobs could react to players' actions. For example, in a fight against a torn Eldritch, Sacred tried to get further away from the mob. The Eldritch didn't like that, so he went from focusing on Joppa, who was the tank, switched to Sacred and cast Creeping Shackles. This caused Sacred's character to forcibly walk back into melee range of the Eldritch. Now, in context of needing to run away, the mob having this ability and the fact that mobs will switch tactics when you decide to run away, all of that will make running a lot trickier than we're used to. And of course, there are other abilities like roots, stuns, mezzas, etc. that vary from mob to mob. The final piece added to give examples of smart leashing behaviors was that mobs will switch to a certain arsenal of abilities to combat players trying to run or climb to safety. That seems to me to mean that while mobs do have a set of abilities that they enter combat with, when you try to run, they will use their abilities with different tactics to try to stop you from being able to escape. The mobs are able to observe players' behaviors and react to them. They're not just stuck chasing you while you run away. They will make deliberate choices to try to stop you from escaping. All of these moving parts combine to create a living, breathing world that challenges players and keeps them on their toes. Now that zone lines aren't nearly as available as a safety net for fights gone wrong, we're going to have to be much more strategic. We'll have to specialize and think out our escape plans, or better yet, more thought out pulls. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you like this, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to hear more, give that subscribe button a click. You can also find me over at Twitch on Wednesday evenings and Twitter. Take care.